Hey guys. Okay, so yesterday I was having a chat to a building designer about the redevelopment options for a property at Yeronga. My feedback at the time was, yeah, I don't think council's going to let you rotate that house to face another frontage to squeeze it within that existing allotment. However, what we could look at doing is potentially sliding the house forward to sit within 20% of the adjoining pre-1947 houses. Then that would leave you with a whopping like 600 or 700 square meters at the rear. Oh, the development options are endless then. His response, he sat there and just went, yeah, so what's this 20% rule you talk of? It was one of those moments where I went, yeah, caught up in my own technical lingo bubble right there, aren't I? Reality check. Now, this whole 20% rule is something that I've been meaning to talk about pretty much since we started recording these videos. It's a topic that, for whatever reason, just keeps slipping off my list. I keep thinking, yeah, I'll get to that next week. Yeah, that can wait. Well, after yesterday's question, I went, the time has come. Today is our day. We're going to talk about the 20% rule. So let's jump behind the computer and let's do this. Okay, so first things first, we need to talk about when this rule actually applies. Well, in simple terms, it applies to any property within the traditional building character overlay. So any property within those character sort of areas, even if the property contains a post-1946 house. Now, let's talk about the rule. The rule can be found within the traditional building character design overlay code. More specifically, it's criterion A01.2. As you can see here, the wording simply says you need to position yourself within 20% of the average front setback of the nearest residential buildings constructed in 1946 or earlier fronting the same street. Bit of a mouthful. There's a few key points though that I just want to point out. You get what I'm trying to say. Things that I want to point out, that's a better way of saying it, before we move on. Firstly, it says that you need to exclude eaves, awnings, stairs, and garages. So we're working off the building proper here, the main part of the building. Next thing you need to note is it says residential buildings. So residential, not commercial structures, and buildings, plural. Now, the final thing that I want to point out is it says fronting the same street. Those are key things that you need to note before we move on. Okay, now let's start talking about examples. So the last inquiry that I was working on this morning was in a property in Red Hill. So I thought, hey, I've already got that screen open. Let's just scroll around and find a good example in Red Hill to work off. I found myself in Lug Street. So that's the only reason I've landed in this street today. So as you can see, pre-1946 city, it's going to be traditional building character overlay. Actually, I should just turn on that overlay just to double check because it could be quite awkward if I'm talking about a property that isn't actually in the Oh, beautiful. It's in the TBC overlay. I'm sweet there. Like I said, a bit awkward if I was talking about rules that didn't actually apply to the example in question. So first thing we're going to talk about is how do you actually identify which buildings to work off? Like I said before, residential, first criteria, buildings, plural is the second criteria. So you need at least one house to work off. Some rare situations you won't find at least one house in the street. That's an anomaly, but you need normally at least two to be working off. So let's say we're working off this house right here. What I'd be doing is counting this house to the north and this house directly to the south. If we're working off this house to the south, if that was the subject site, I would work off this one and this one here. Now, the rule is a little bit grey. It doesn't say how many buildings you need to count. So if it happened to suit my situation, I might just also count that one up there. So there is a little bit of flexibility, but you have to use common sense. You can't go counting 50 houses in the street and say they're the nearest buildings. They're not nearest, are they? Like I said, use common sense. Okay, so once you've established what buildings you're going to count, let's work out how you work out. Oh, I need a coffee this morning. You get what I'm trying to say. You need to establish where the front boundary is. Sometimes it's really, really easy. So you look up and down here, you can see the fence outline there. Oh, so clear where the boundary is. Same thing here, another fence line. Oh, super easy. Oh, super easy there. Yeah, what happens if you get down here where you got trees over the boundary? Yeah, not so easy now, is it? So I'm going to show you guys a little trick here. What you need to do is come up here to the draw sort of toolbar. That's the word I was going for. And this little baby right here. Now what you do is you find the fence marker that's nearest to the property, not nearest to the property, sorry, in the same street. And then you just drag it down and you make sure you line up with all of those properties so you overlap the fence line that you can actually see there. So let's use over here as another example. Let's come up here and then we come down and there. So we may not be able to see where the fence line comes at these points or runs at these points, but you can definitely see it up here. And common sense suggests it's going to run in a straight sort of line. So that, if I was working with this property here, now gives me my front boundary marker. That red line is the point that I'm going to measure off. So what I then do is come up here to the measuring tool and I go to the ruler. So I rest my mouse on that little red line and I go to the front roof outline. Now, again, going back to the wording, we said you need to exclude eaves. Eaves are typically 40 centimeters to 60 centimeters in depth. I'd recommend you jump on Street View and have a look at how big those eaves actually are. Because every now and then, especially in the really old areas, you can get some anomalies. You can get some really piddly little eaves. I don't know why, but for some reason they pop up every now and then. So you want to make sure this is not one of those scenarios. So what you do is you measure to the front of the roof, and as we can see, it's about 5.1 there. What I would then do is go, okay, maybe it's got 400 eaves on it, so let's say it's 5.5. Now, a little tip here, and this is not a fail-safe, but I always like to round up or round down my number, because logically people are not going to go, oh, I'm going to set this house back 5.3 meters from the front boundary. No, they're going to measure it 5.5 or 5 or 6. It's typically going to be one of those either full numbers or half numbers. So round it up or round it down. That then gives you your front setback. Now, this is obviously a very crude first step in the measuring process. Before you go and do anything that's concrete, make financial decisions, all that sort of stuff, you actually need to verify the setbacks. So get out there, get a surveyor to measure it, or get a tape measure yourself and measure it. But this gives you something to work off in that initial design sort of phase. So let's say the front setback there is 5.5. Let me just write this one down so I don't forget. 5.5. Okay, so then we come up here and let's do the ruler again, and let's just say that's our subject site. We're going to come up to this one here. So we're going to go on the front boundary, come forward 6 meters. I'm going to assume that's probably going to be 6.5 once we allow for the eaves. So we've got 5.5 plus 6.5. Now let's go to our trusty calculator. I'm going to rely on the calculator here so I don't make a fool of myself. So we go 5.5 plus 6.5 equals 12. So 12 is our starting number. Then we go divide 2. That equals our average. So that gives us 6. Then what we do is 6 times 0.8 equals 4.8. So our lower limit of our 20% range is 4.8. So then we come back to our average, which was 6, and we go times 1.2, and that gives us 7.2, which is our upper limit of our 20% range. So if we come back to this being our subject site, if we want to relocate that house forward or backwards, we could move it within 4.8 and 7.2 meters of that front boundary. If we did that, we tick the requirements for AO 1.2, I believe it was. Don't quote me on that. But basically you tick the requirement within the traditional building character overlay design code. Happy days, sweet. Now, sometimes the properties that are next door to you, they're kind of like random anomalies. Every now and then you get this really big setback or you get this really short setback and it doesn't work for you. So yes, you can lodge an application with council to seek an alternate outcome in that instance. So basically to say to council, look, that one's the oddball. We want to work off the general setback within the rest of the street. In that situation, if you can show to council just by the use of aerial photos that that is an anomaly, they're going to support it. However, if you want to use one house that's way up here and it's totally out of character with the rest of the street, yeah, no, not going to work. So I guess we should probably explore what's the intent behind these rules. Why is council fixated on trying to work out this 20%? Well, what you need to essentially do is think of it, what am I trying to say here? Basically, what they want to make sure is that it's not going to stick out like a sore thumb. So when you're driving down the street, if you've got all these beautiful, you think Chelmer, where everyone's got these massive grand setbacks with these beautiful landscaped gardens, you think like Laurel Avenue, that sort of stuff. So you've got all these properties that are set right back. If you suddenly do an infill development, so you do a new house or work to a house that suddenly brings your property right forward, it's going to stand out. It's going to look ugly. As you're driving down the street, you're going to go, whoa, what's that? Suddenly you're not seeing beautiful character houses. You're seeing this thing just catching your eye. Or the alternate option is you've got everyone, let's say Red Hill, going through Red Hill, everyone's right close up to their front boundaries. And suddenly you want to push your new house 10 meters off the front boundary. Why you'd ever do that, I don't know, because everyone wants the backyard. They want their recreation space in the backyard, not at the front. But let's just say you want to push yourself right back. Maybe topography reasons, you need to get your driveway in. Yeah, same thing. You're driving down, instead of seeing all these beautiful, cute old houses, you're going, oh, what's that? That's not normal. That's catching my eye. Suddenly that's all you're seeing. So council wants to ensure that we've got that consistency of the streetscape to make sure that everything flows nicely and everything's complementary, let's just say, to the original character in the street. Okay, so I'm just going to check my little post-it note here to make sure I've covered off everything I want to talk about. So we've talked about the intent behind it, the wording, how you actually find the houses, the fact that it's a little bit grey, you can blur the boundaries there, use the fences and use the drawing tool to be able to work out where the boundary is, exclude your eaves, and how to break the rule. Oh, I've covered everything. So there you go. Next time a town planner just casually says to you, oh, just stick to the 20%, or you can go to the 20%, okay? You'll understand exactly what they're talking about. So I think that covers everything that I wanted to talk about today. As I always say, until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number two, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all.